I've been programmed to believe, hey, if you live a good life, you'll go to heaven, God's going to save you, this, that, and the third. And then as I prayed and continued to pray in the darkness, uh, nobody ever spoke to me. Nobody ever said anything. Nobody fixed anything. Nobody, and that's where I realized, like, nobody's coming to save you. It doesn't matter how many gospel songs you sing. It doesn't matter how many scriptures you read. Like, none of that matters. What matters is what you do in the space that you're in and how you react to what's being put in front of you.
Hey everyone, this is Greg Washington, and welcome to my next episode of Guards Down. I have with me today Jerome Myers. Jerome, how's it going?
Great, man. How are you?
Doing well. Hey, well, it's another day in Coronaville. I tell you that. Being quarantined. How are things over there with you?
Oh, just peachy. I mean, end of the day, it is what it is, man. We just enjoy and make the best of the situation.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, look, tell the audience a little bit about yourself while we're here before we get started.
I don't even know where to start. I'm a corporate America dropout. I call Greg Sugar Dumpling whenever I get the opportunity to. We've known each other. Fun fact about me and Greg, we skipped school one day in high school, went to Raleigh, and left the headlights on in the car. And when we came out of the mall, the battery's dead, and we had no idea how we were going to get home. So we've been up to these shenanigans for a really long time. But, Greg's one of my best friends in the whole world. I dropped out of corporate America back in 2016. Had built a $20 million division for a construction company. We were responsible for taking overhead power lines and putting them underground. I was employee number 2. We had about 175 employees that came into the group by September of that year. I started in January, and we were about 30% profitable. At the end of the year, I got the opportunity to lay off people for the first time. That sucked. Promised myself I'd never do that again. And then the next year I had to do the same thing. And so I decided I was done and I was out and started this path and trying to help other people transition from work they're not passionate about into living a life that's full of fulfillment.
Gotcha. Well, that's an awesome story as far as being able to come from corporate America where you're making a really good living, but having to deal with the realities of, if laying people off in the construction world, right? Because it's somewhat seasonal depending on projects and stuff, to helping people follow their passions. So there is a reason why you went this route. And so tell us, out of all the things that you could be doing in this world, why did you want to start helping people follow their passions?
I think it's a culmination of a lot of things. When I was in the front yard with my mom as a 5-year-old, or maybe I was 4, and I was playing with my Tonka trucks, there's this guy on the back of the trash truck named Lonnie. He lived at the other end of the cul-de-sac from us. And he would get home every day around 2, 3 o'clock. But when we were in the front yard at, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, he'd ride around and he'd hop off the back of the trash truck, throw the trash into the back, pull the lever, and you hear the crunching sound, and it's a big machine, and I got super excited about that stuff. My dad worked Carolina half days. He'd go to work before 6, he'd come back after 6. And so when I told my mom I want to be a trash man because I thought the lifestyle was cool, you got to operate big machinery, he was home early, etc., she looked at me and said, baby, that's not going to buy you the Nikes and other nice things that you like. You have to pick a job that's going to afford you the lifestyle that you desire to live. And that stuck with me. Um, it was great advice. I think the thing that wasn't actually accurate about it was it's not so much a job, it's an income stream. And so once I got into college, I realized that you can decouple your time from money. And it's not just about going somewhere, trading your hour for dollars, and, having to pick between being wealthy or financially free and having fulfilling work. And so we
Right.
started this journey of buying apartment buildings and doing real estate stuff and doing deals so that we were able to earn income but not have to be in a specific place at a specific time.
Gotcha. Okay, so you grew up with both your mom and dad,
Mhm.
right? And it sounds like they taught you some pretty good values as far as money isn't everything, right? The next question is around, what else did they teach you? What did they teach you or do you feel like you were well equipped when it came to coping and dealing with trauma and grief and traumatic experiences in life?
No, right? I've seen my dad cry once, and I never really got that. Um, I know my mom, now I know that my mom went through depression after she had a miscarriage when I was like 7 or 8. And I never really understood like what happened or what changed. But as I got older and I saw things and went through some stuff with, being a parent and kind of understanding postpartum depression and all those things, I began to understand parts of the world that I was previously naive to or oblivious to. My parents didn't argue in front of me. I grew up in a sober household, no smoking, no drinking, no nothing, right? And they even have a hard time taking pills for pain. And so I grew up in this really safe, stable environment that they crave so much. My dad grew up in South Carolina, and when he was like 13 or 14, he got moved to New York City, started getting in a lot of trouble because his mom was always at work and his dad wasn't around. My mom grew up super poor. She was the youngest of 11 kids. And my grandma on my mom's side was a sharecropper. And her husband was an alcoholic. Actually never got to meet him. But he used to come home and beat her in front of my mom. And so that was a super traumatic experience for her. And one of the promises that I made to my mom, and I don't even think I did it unsolicited. I think she asked me. She just said, she told me that story about her father and asked that I not consume alcohol or other drugs because she saw what it does to people when they actually get intoxicated. And so, I've been able to hold true to that for her. And I mean, for me too. I mean, it wasn't an example for me. So it's just kind of been one of those things off in the periphery. Um, and so, my parents wanted to create that environment for me, that safe, uh, super comfortable, super stable. I lived in one house the whole time. After we moved out of our trailer, we moved in a house, and I was in that house till I graduated high school. And then my parents moved maybe 5 or 10 years, probably 5 years after I graduated from college. They moved into a new home a little further away from where I grew up. But, I had a super stable upbringing, and I had all the pieces. We weren't rich, but I had all of the things that a lot of people crave for as kids.
I'm messing with them, ladies and gentlemen. I was going to tell them that's a very good story, right? But do you feel like you really answered the question?
And
Did you learn tools and skills to help you cope and deal with traumatic experiences and grief?
and so I thought I started that rant with no, right? I didn't see trauma. I didn't see grief. I didn't experience loss in a real way with anybody that was close to me.
Got you. So then what was your first experience dealing with it, and how well or how bad did you take it?
It was not terribly bad. So I had a teammate in middle school commit suicide. At least that's how it was labeled. And so it was one of my friends, Jerome Walters. We went all the way through elementary school together, and we were playing middle school football together. And, you know, I blame myself for this to this day, right? We were supposed to go to a high school football game that night, and I didn't call him. We didn't pick him up. And on Monday, or I don't even know if it was Monday or Saturday, I found out that he was playing Russian roulette that night and he was dead. And so that was the last time that I was ever okay not keeping my word to somebody. That was rough. It was really rough. And then when I got to college, the same thing happened, except it was murder this time instead of murder of a teammate, instead of Russian roulette. And probably a little bit before that, one of my favorite cousins was murdered on the streets of DC with a shotgun. But that was drug related and it's kind of part of it. So, you know, those were the most poignant introductions with, you know, loss for me. And, you know, it varied from not eating to not accepting that it happened to blaming myself and being irrational about the approach. You know, my mom helped me through the Jarrell thing. I was like, I want to get a tattoo, blah, 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 blah. She was like, yeah, no, um, I'm going to buy you. And she bought me this like bracelet thing. And then we like engraved his initials on it. And then, you know, as we got to high school, I would, because I never let go of the tattoo idea, I would get green Visa marker and have somebody write his initials and ROP on my arm before the game. And I did that all the way through high school and kind of left it when I left high school. But that was kind of my way of remembering him and continue to take his memory and try to lift it up. And I guess probably one of the most recent things that happened was back in 2012 when Hambone died. And it was just kind of out of the blue. And, you know, I got to the funeral like 2 or 3 hours early. And, you know, I had a 3 or 4 hour drive in front of that, but I just couldn't sleep the night before. And I really started asking myself the questions like, are you really living out the life you're supposed to live? That guy was probably a better person pound for pound than you will ever be. And you're still happen to be here. So what is that? And I guess I skipped one thing that happened before that, and that would be in 2005, August 13th, 2005, when I was in a head-on accident with a dump truck. And I felt like my life stopped completely. Ended up in ICU for a few days, was medevaced from the accident site to the hospital.
I mean, you almost died. Like you were supposed to be 6'5", and here you are, you know, 6'2".
Funny. Yeah. I mean, I was in a wheelchair for a while, and, you know, it was a really sobering experience. And I made some life changes there, made some mistakes in that process of trying to put all the pieces back together. It was the first time that my heart was really broken that I can think of. And so, you know, I stack all that stuff together and say, no, I didn't really have I wasn't taught any tools or techniques to manage my way through the process. And I didn't have an example to look to say, okay, this is good or bad. You know, the one time that I saw my dad cry was at his father's funeral. And I wasn't close to his father. I think I saw him twice and probably spent a total of an hour with him the whole time that I had it, or had him around. My dad just shed like 2 tears and then it was over. It's just like, you're tough. You don't do that. You don't cry. And, you know, he's a soldier. He's a military man. He went into the Marines when he was 16. And then he got out, did some security work, and then he got in the Army, and did military intelligence for however long until he retired. And so, you know, I'm the son of a soldier, and he treated me like a troop. It is what it is. And, you know, you just kind of go through it and you deal with it, and crying doesn't solve anything. You have rational conversations, and you accept what's real and what's not.
But I mean, so for you, you had to deal with a real life situation at the earliest of ages, right? In middle school, when you're just getting to know yourself and who you are and see your identity. Um, I strongly believe that trauma shapes our life, right? In a good or bad way, it still shapes our life. And so, um, even though you weren't taught the tools, let's say from your surroundings, you had to learn them on your own. So, can you speak to that a little more?
Hey guys, it's Jerome. Greg and I wanted to invite you to the community that we created for the whole Guards Down family. Jump on Facebook or check the show notes for the Guards Down Facebook group. There you'll be able to find a community of folks who are committed to raising awareness about complex grief and PTSD. Look forward to chatting with you guys in the group. Now let's get back to the episode.
Because your first episode, you were talking about you wanted to get a tattoo in remembrance of your friend, but your mom was like, no, you probably shouldn't do that. Let's do this instead. And then, you had your teammate that was murdered, and then you had the car accident, right? And then you had another close teammate from high school that, died because basically he died of a broken heart because his older brother, had passed. And so, tell us what you had to learn, right, about yourself and about how to deal and cope with all of this.
Yeah, man. So it'll probably turn some people off, but in 2010, which is in the middle of all this stuff, I went into a pretty deep depression 6 months after my first child was born. And I wasn't diagnosed. I never sought medical help. I always thought that was cheesy. And so I went on this deep dive. I was getting continuous feedback from my ex-wife that I wasn't a good husband. And she never said that I did anything well as a father either. And I was seeking her approval. And so this was during the recession. I didn't get impacted by the recession. I didn't lose my job. I was gainfully employed. I was in a job that I hated though. And so, I just went super deep into myself. I started questioning everything. I've been programmed to believe, hey, if you live a good life, you'll go to heaven. God's going to save you, this, that, and the third. And then as I prayed and continued to pray in the darkness, nobody ever spoke to me. Nobody ever said anything. Nobody fixed anything. And that's where I realized, nobody's coming to save you. It doesn't matter how many gospel songs you sing. It doesn't matter how many scriptures you read. None of that matters. What matters is what you do in the space that you're in and how you react to what's being put in front of you. And so I shook everything. Once that foundation, because I used to go to Sunday school every week. I used to go to some form of church service. And at one point I was even going to Bible study on Wednesdays like all good Christians do, right? But I started questioning all of that stuff. And what I realized is that I didn't believe any of it. I was just doing it out of tradition. My dad's always been the head deacon in the church that we were in. My mom would usher every Sunday. They never made me sing in the choir, but I would have to usher or participate in some other way. And so, that was the pacifier for loss was, God will take care of it. Jesus will fix it. Everybody's okay. But, what about those times when nobody responds to those prayers? And so I've had some other experiences where I've traveled internationally, been to Africa and seen things. And it's just and then even my experience with other people in Christianity, it's just hey, if that's what love is, if that's what I'm waiting for or hoping for, that's not what I want to be. It's inauthentic. And then I started thinking about, hey, if I truly want to be a good person, do I need the threat of hell in order to do that? And I kept coming back to a no. And so now, do I need the promise of heaven if I live a good life? Or am I just doing it because I think it's the right thing to do? And I always came back to the answer of yes. And so what was I really holding on to, or what was that practice for? And I didn't have an answer. And so from there, I was able to peel back everything and really spend my time um, looking through and taking things from different approaches and being open to practices from different um, religions or spirituality or whatever you want to label it as. And what I found was like suffering comes from expectation. And so if my expectation is this person's always going to be there, then when they leave, I get super frustrated or upset or I'm being selfish because I'm asking them because they're not there for me, right? I'm expecting them to be there because I want them to do something for me, which I don't think that's realistic, right? And so where I really ended up was, hey, the things that you do need to be done in service of others. And if you're in service of others, then everything will work itself out. And the only time that you end up suffering, which is what like the loss and the grief is all about, is when you're being selfish. And so once I learned to stop being selfish, I stopped having that suffering feeling that a lot of people experience when they lose things or they're grieving. And every time that I come back to that, I think about why I feel the way I do. And it's always rooted in being me wanting something or me expecting something.
So in the midst of the trauma and the grief that you encountered, you felt like the anguish that you either put on yourself or that was dealt, you feel like that was selfish?
So from my perspective, it's always self-imposed, right? You feel like you lost something, right? The memories are forever yours. Let's talk about death specifically, or
Mm-hmm.
even relationship, whether a relationship ends like it's all death, right? You feel like you've lost something that was yours. Once you embrace the concept that nothing belongs to you, you're just managing or being a steward over it while it's in that season with you. And if it's time for it to leave, you can love it and let it be free to go. You don't end up in a space of anguish or pain or anything. It's great that you enjoy something and you want it around, but it's not yours. And I think we get so caught up in possession and, owning things and controlling things that wasn't, it's not core for me anymore. I let that go. People are in my life because they want to be. And if they don't want to be, then they're free to go. And I don't get upset when they're ready to make that transition.
I definitely agree with that point of view. Like, I mean, that's a really good way of looking at it from a omniscient viewpoint. Um, you sit here, and I guess the question that comes to mind from that, right, or the next topic is about love, right? So to be a caregiver of those that are within, your surroundings, to love and care for and manage and cultivate that relationship, whether it be good or bad. Can you say you truly love someone in that moment if you have to learn to let them go?
So love is freeing, right? Love isn't controlling. It's not being captive. Love is protecting. And one of the hardest things that I had to learn, especially with adults, is some people don't want your protection, right? Like as men, we're taught, hey, you need to provide and protect, right? If you provide and protect, you're being a man. But there are people who want to be independent and they don't want your provision and protection. They want to do it on their own. And so are you loving them if you're treating them in a manner that they don't want to be treated? Or are you forcing them to be a captive to this construct that you've created that you didn't even create it? It was imposed on you by somebody else. And when you really step back and think about it, do you really believe that? That's the question that I had to ask myself. But provision and protection is what a lot of men see as love or have been taught. That's what their role is. That's what they're responsible for. And I held that at the highest regard. I thought that was everything at one point. But then I realized, hey, not everybody appreciates that. And so now I'm running around doing more provision and protection, more provision and protection, and it's not appreciated. So why am I doing that? And the answer was, don't do that anymore. If that's not what's appreciated in the context of the relationship. And I think every relationship has its own, marching orders or beat, cadence. And so you've got to figure out, hey, in this ecosystem that we're creating, how are we going to relation? And, it's one thing for this person, it's another thing for that person. And, everybody we interact with, it has their own thing. And so in saying that, it's just really important that you understand what the person is looking for. Now, with that said, though, people will come into a relationship with you and they'll bring their trauma into it. They'll expect things that are unhealthy, and you have to be willing to say, hey, that's not healthy. I'm not willing to do that, or I don't want to do that with you. And because you have to stay true to, I guess, your moral compass as well. And so, there's this song and dance where you're trying to massage the relationship, especially the long-term relationships. And I guess that's one of the things for me is like I cultivate really deep relationships. I'm terrible at scuba diving. I'm terrible at surface stuff. But like when people want to go deep and really dig into things and look in the truth mirror, that's what I'm about. That's all the fun for me. And
I got you. So I want to interject in one quick point, right? Because I want to be able to tie in this relationship piece to dealing with grief.
mm-hmm.
So you made a point of, all right, this is something that I don't want to accept from a relationship, right? Because you see it being damaging or detrimental, right? From an external person.
Mm-hmm.
Internally, right? When you're dealing with grief and trauma, you kind of have to do the same thing for yourself. Would you agree? Can you expound on that?
Yeah, I think you have to be kinder to yourself than you are to other people. I think it's when you're a high achiever and, alpha, right? I spend a lot of time with alphas, whether it's a male or a female, and they're really hard on themselves. They expect excellence. And when they don't achieve that expected outcome, they get really, really aggressive with their self-talk. And, when you put all those pieces together, if nobody is around you to help pull you out of that, death spiral, things can get really ugly. That's why you see people like Robin Williams commit suicide. It's like you have everything in the world, but you don't. And if you don't have people paying enough attention to check in with you and make sure everything's going well, or giving you an outlet, or checking in to make sure they hear the messaging that you're speaking to yourself, so that they can interject and interrupt that path, that talk, you can end up putting yourself in a place that you don't belong. And so, yeah, absolutely. You need to be kinder to yourself than you are to others. And, I'll extend that, Greg. When we deal with people in our homes, right, we're often kinder to strangers or people in the workplace than we are to the people in our homes. And as you get closer, like even like going inside and start talking to yourself, you're less kind talking to yourself than you are to those immediately around you. And so it's just kind of like these concentric circles where, you're being polite. And I really think we have it backwards. I think we need to be kinder to ourselves, and then those people closest to us, we should be the next level of kindness to them. And then those people that we don't know, I mean, we don't have the relationship with them. So, why are we tiptoeing and walking on eggshells instead of showing up with them? And so I would like to see more people invert that spread of kindness.
Got you. Okay. Well, I know we are pushing time. To wrap it up, to a degree, what advice would you tell someone that's out there that might be going through or just recently going through what you've been through, when it comes to, your middle school self, high school and college, and now, like what advice would you give someone out there who's probably about to, or is currently going through what you're going through?
I think the first thing is don't take yourself so seriously. My daughter called me superhero. Daddy's a superhero. She said that to me a few weeks ago because I was able to do something that she couldn't figure out. And I think, you kind of put those labels on and you wear them, and everything has to always be right. Whether, it's income or job or whatever it is. Stop taking yourself so seriously. That doesn't mean that you don't try as hard as you can possibly can, but if you're not able to affect the result that you desire, it doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you're a loser, and it doesn't change all of the accomplishments and struggles that you've worked your way through in the past, right? So you deserve some kindness there, and your reputation is more than just the moment that you're in. And so once you can go to that place and be grateful for those things and those experiences, then you pause and you look at the situation around you and figure out something in that space that's meaningful for you, right? And not like some surface blah, blah, bull, right? But something like, okay, this is happening for me, not to me. And this is going to translate into something good. You might not know what the outcome is, but you have to know that this is pushing you to that new place that you're supposed to go to. And you're riding the wave, and you can't control the wave, but you can control what you do on the wave. And I think a lot of people get lost in that. Like, if you're trying to ride a wave, and I'm not a surfer, but if you get up on your surfboard and you're riding the wave, you're embracing and putting yourself in a better position so that you don't wipe out. And I think a lot of people just kind of get overwhelmed and go in this death spiral, and that's where you end up in, suicide and a lot of these other self-defeating behaviors instead of, fighting. And I don't think everybody has this experience, but, Greg, you and I do. And, when we were playing on that defense in high school, we played through the whistle, right? You always play through the whistle. You don't just wait until it's almost over. You finish. You don't give up if you're down on the scoreboard. You're down 2 touchdowns. There's 2 minutes left. You don't give up. You don't just kind of go through the motions. You give extraordinary effort until somebody else tells you that it's over. But never quit. Don't give up. You've gotten through everything else that showed up to hurt you. And in that, you have strength to get through this new thing that's been put in front of you.
Okay. So just to recap, the first thing you said was, don't take yourself so seriously, right? Don't be so serious. The second part was be kind to yourself. And then you said, find your focus as something being very genuine and something that, you're passionate about. And the other part, or the last part you said was, play through the whistle, right? Finish strong and see what you're doing through. I like all 4 of those. I mean, that's just very well-rounded when it comes to trying to figure out who you are, what you're going through, and what you want. This has been a very good interview. I didn't think we were ready for it. But shoot, man, to go this deep, I really appreciate you sharing with us. Any last words you would like to say, out there?
It's never as bad as you think it is when it's bad. And it's easy to tell yourself the story that it's never going to get better. That's not true. And it doesn't matter what your situation is. I've been in really rough situations and been in some great situations. And so what I can tell you, if you're out there and you don't feel like there's a way out, you don't feel like there's an answer, I promise that there is one. And you just have to be willing to trust your process and work through it and find people to support you while you go through that process. And you can make it through. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And so get help, people to support you, and you'll be able to get through this and make it to the next level.
There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Greg Washington and again, Jerome Myers with Guards Down, and we appreciate you listening. Like always, stay focused and stay engaged. Be safe out there.